Hello people, in today's video I've got a really special guest for you guys. I'm sure a lot of people do know about him. His name is Tommo. He runs the Tommo F1 YouTube channel, so thank you for agreeing to do this collaboration with me, Tommo.
Thank you for having me, Raz, mate. It's a pleasure. And we had some technical difficulties, but we're finally here, mate. So yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Not a problem at all, mate. Not a problem at all. And what I thought we was gonna talk about was we're going to talk about Helmut Marko and whether he's what we make of his sometimes a bit of controversial opinions in regarding Red Bull and whether he's good or bad for the team. So, what's your opinion on it?
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because he's obviously come out with some very odd things, and he seems to. Obviously, he's an ex-driver who's come from a generation of drivers. Well, just a generation generally that was quite. People were known for being quite out there and outspoken and not particularly kind of politically correct. And some people can say that's a good thing or a bad thing, but Helmut, I don't know. He seems like a really intimidating man.
Yes, I would agree with that. And my first question to you is, who do you think is the real team principal in Red Bull? Is it Christian Horner or is it Helmut Marko?
Oh, that's a good question, man. I don't know. I see that they say that Helmut's an advisor, right? And Christian is technically the team principal. I mean, if I was Christian, I don't know why I would want Helmut around, because it seems that Helmut's, he comes out with this weird stuff that, talking about the coronavirus and infecting all the drivers on purpose, and then Christian's kind of got to double back and be like, oh, well, he didn't really mean it because he didn't really know the extent at the time, like kind of trying to apologise for your crazy granddad. So I don't really know. I think Christian is, but I think maybe Helmut kind of thinks he is. I guess that's kind of what I think, I suppose.
Yes, I agree with that. But do you think he is bad for the Red Bull racing team?
Do I think I do? I do. I do think he's not. I don't think he's a positive influence in that team. I really don't. I'm very much. Obviously, there's examples to the contrary, but I think generally the best way to manage people is to create an environment of positivity. Drivers are allowed to make mistakes and errors, and because you have to make errors and you have to fail in life in order to learn, right? And it feels like Helmut he's the man who's really instilled this cutthroat attitude in at Red Bull. I could be wrong. It could be Christian leading that. And I'm not a big fan of Christian because I think he does play a part in that. But I just don't. Yeah, just generally their kind of approach to drivers. How Pierre was treated when it come to him being kicked out of the team, I thought was just very inhumane. Like these guys, yes, they're Formula One drivers who earn a lot of money, but they're still just people at the end of the day, and I wasn't very happy with how, he was treated and how many drivers previously have been too.
I mean, yes, I agree with you. In fact, I was really angry when we all remember Daniel Kvyat, don't we? I mean, literally, he got fired and then he got hired 3 times.
It's crazy, isn't it? Literally, it is. I think, again, it's almost like what bothered me the most about the Pierre Gasly thing. To be honest, because obviously I remember when Danny was kicked out, but obviously that's not as fresh in the memory. So I remember more of the specifics around Pierre and how, Helmut and Christian as well, he was just as guilty of it, were saying right up until like the week before they kicked him that, oh, there's no plans on changing the drivers, blah blah blah, this and that, and Pierre had no idea it was coming. Like, what why do that? I don't understand what benefit was to come out of them doing that and not just being open and honest from the start and just being like, look, we're going to try Pierre out. You know, there's no guarantees on anything. Like, why give him that false sense of hope and then make him look like a mug when you do eventually drop him? Because I think it was the right decision to replace him for sure. It's just, you know, give the driver a bit of a safety net. I mean, it's very fortunate that Pierre did bounce back in the way he did in the Toro Rosso, and I'm chuffed for him that he has. But yeah, I just think that could have. There's plenty of other drivers. You know, you look at like Jean-Eric Verne, you know, Buemi. There's loads of, you know, Hartley. It seems that no driver leaves Red Bull without a bit of a bitter taste in their mouth.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And I think, was it who was that Formula 2 driver that actually said that all Helmut Marko does is kill careers?
I mean, you can see. I can't remember who that is either, to be honest. But I do remember the quote, and yeah, I mean, he just does seem like this. I don't know, this just toxic kind of personality. Look, again, we only see what we see from a spectator point of view. I'm sure there's more to it than that. I'm sure there's a nice side to Helmut that we haven't been blessed with yet. But yeah, I mean, there's no smoke without fire, right? And many a driver, including, you know, the younger guys in F2, and have not had the kindest of words to say about Dr. Helmut. And I don't even know in what capacity he's a doctor. Do you know, Raz? Like, what makes him a doctor?
No, I actually don't know why he's a doctor. All I know is that he had to give up his racing career because he's got a false eye and he's got a glass eye. So that's all I know.
Yeah.
And I think there's a bit of a frustrated racing driver behind him. You see, because I think, but having said that, I think the problem with Red Bull is that they only focused on two drivers really. One of them being Max Verstappen and the other one being Sebastian Vettel. You know, they haven't really put all their support behind any other drivers, I do believe. But what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's, again, you've got a, Red Bull. I do genuinely think they once this season does start, I think they will mount a real title challenge. And I think they've got two. Max is insanely talented, which is clear to see, and I think Alex, he can definitely be up there with the big boys for sure, like going forward. But again, like I'm not actually sure off the top of my head when Dr. Helmut got involved with the team. Do you know actually, like when he started with Red Bull?
I think he started right from the beginning, didn't he? Because I think he is best mates with Dietrich Mateschitz, and
okay.
Dietrich Mateschitz actually really values him, and because I do, F1 Elvis, Mark Priestley.
Yes, I do.
I actually tweeted him and asked him the question, why is, like, I think I said, why is Christian Horner basically Helmut Marko's puppet, I think is what I said, and he sort of said that they've got a long history together, and he is sort of Dietrich Mateschitz really values what um, Helmut Marko says. But my question to you is, if you was a Formula One driver at the start of your career, and you had the chance to go um, for into the Red Bull program, would you do it?
I mean, I think if there weren't any other options on the table, but if I had free choice of all of the young driver programs available, the Red Bull would be very much at the bottom of my list. I mean, yeah. If it's that or nothing, then of course. But yeah, it's definitely the worst of the bunch, if you ask me. Because again, there's no smoke without fire, and so it feels like yeah, not many of the drivers. I don't know. Obviously, there are examples of drivers who have achieved amazing things from it. But I don't know, man. It's just that style of kind of management and that style of like looking after. Yes, these are young kids as well, man. Like you've got to bear that in mind. A lot of these are still children. Like they're 15, 16, like even younger. Like and it can be like it's such a formative and changing part of your life. And if you've got people in charge who aren't kind of sensitive to that fact and treating people in a kind of a nice, kind way. I mean, it's not much to ask if you ask me. It would definitely be, again, like, well, to answer the original question, yes and no, because of the reasons I outlined.
Yeah, I couldn't believe why Kvyat actually went back to Red Bull for the third time.
Maybe he just wanted to prove a point. I mean, I don't know. I feel like that could, again, I don't feel I know Daniel Kvyat that well as drivers go because he doesn't really put himself out there like a lot of other drivers do. But I imagine he is the kind of guy who potentially, if he's been wronged and feels wronged, which we know he did when he got dropped from Red Bull, even though ultimately you've got to objectively look at that and say that was the right decision. He's looking for a point to prove, I think, and obviously a lot of people were saying that they thought he should have, he merited the drive at Red Bull last year, which I'm sure he was, a bit frustrated that Alex got it above him. But again, I think like Kvyat had he had a strong start to last year, and I think Albon did as well. And then obviously towards the end of the season, Kvyat's kind of performances dropped off a little. So I don't know. I don't see his career moving forward while he's at that team, but it just depends on what he wants. I mean, I think he could do a good job in a Haas. I think he could do a good job in numerous cars. I definitely think he's good enough to be in F1. But yeah, I think ultimately, I think the reason he's still there, and I think he will stay there as long as, well, A, there's a guaranteed seat for him in F1, but also while he's kind of got a point to prove to really, shove it to Helmut Marko and Christian Horner.
Yeah, but having said that, I do believe Red Bull need to um, rein Helmut Marko in a bit, because I think with the whole coronavirus thing, going back to it, I think that has really hurt the team, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because that when I first heard about it, I did a video about it, and I think, you imagine if they did that, and something went wrong. Do you know what I mean? That that
He,
that they should much rather invest a few billions in trying to find a cure than do something stupid like that.
I mean, I feel like he's kind of like the Donald Trump of F1. He just comes out with these ridiculous statements that, this is not the first time that he's dropped some like mad, crazy out there thing. And yeah, I mean, I don't think he's a trustworthy pair of hands, for sure. In the same way that I felt kind of, towards the end of his reign, Bernie was didn't seem the he was coming up with some quite odd. I mean, he's always been a kooky character, Bernie, but there was certainly questionable kind of decision making towards the end of his reign. And I think Helmut, again, obviously because of his, I guess like you say, he's got those links at the top at Red Bull. So I don't know. It sounds like his position is pretty safe, which is a shame because I completely agree. Like you can imagine when that statement came out, the Red Bull PR team must have just put their heads in their hands and been like, "What is my life?"
Yeah, but the problem is nobody tells him to F off. Do you know what I mean? Nobody really tells him to shut up.
He's got the power though. That's the thing. He knows the boss, and unfortunately, I think if anyone did, they'd soon be out the door, which is sad. It shouldn't be that way, but it sounds like that's kind of the reality of the situation.
But the thing is, I mean, coming back to the whole position that Red Bull is currently in, because don't forget Alex Albon was is was a former reject of Red Bull, because they kicked him out the young driver program before, and then they had to come crawling back and beg him to to drive for him again. So you know what I mean. So what do you think about their decision making processes?
Well, that's it. He's not the only one, is it? I mean, Carlos Sainz was in the bloody Toro Rosso, and obviously they elected for Gasly over Sainz. Sainz obviously went to Renault, and then eventually went to McLaren, and now seems to be kind of, one of the most solid pair of hands, and he's still got a long career ahead of him as well. So there's Carlos as well. But yeah, in terms of their kind of decision making, again, it's part of the issue with that style of managing young talent. I mean, you can apply the same thing to football, right? I mean, Chelsea, they're kind of renowned for, having let go of some amazing talents in their kind of, not some, well, kind of youth system. I mean, more recently they've done well, but when you look at the likes of kind of De Bruyne and Lukaku and, Salah, there's a lot of young players that they maybe let go of too soon because it was too cutthroat and because they weren't performing straight away, rather than nurturing that talent and giving it the time it needs. Because not every player, in the same way that not every driver is a Max Verstappen. Max literally hit the ground running and was straight away good. Same with Sebastian. But not all drivers are going to be like that. Some drivers do take a little bit more time and eventually become great. But you can't expect every single driver to do the same. I mean, I say Max hit the ground running. Did he? I don't know. Like when he won his first race, but he used to get involved in a lot of incidents. And I feel that Charles has actually had a more impressive start to his F1 career than Max has. But again, that they that's the problem with that system. If you are going to put so much pressure on these kids to perform straight away, not all of them are going to respond well to that. And the polarizing kind of the difference between Gasly and Albon, how they both perform so differently. Even though I think Gasly is an incredibly talented driver, you look in the Toro Rosso, they had equal, if not Gasly maybe even did a little bit better than Alex in the Toro Rosso. So you can't take that away from him. And yeah, it's just it's a very risky strategy, and unfortunately it ends in tears a lot of the time for the actual kids who are involved.
Don't forget also, Gasly got second place before Alex got podium.
Exactly. And I think, what, actually, I mentioned this in one of my videos. I think that, Pierre obviously was gutted when he lost, his seat at Red Bull. But obviously with what happened to Antoine Hubert, and we know how like close them two were, I think an incident like that, it when you lose someone close to you, it really does like change your perspective on things. And I think, you know, Pierre would have had so much like pent up frustration coming into that, like having lost his seat, and for then that to happen, and almost like I feel like that could have potentially been like a bit of a reset button for him to be like, actually, you know what, I need to just be grateful for the opportunity that I still have. I'm still in an F1 seat, and he went on to have a really really strong end to the year. So again, that's kind of like you say. I think, you know, that wasn't the right time for Pierre, and I think that again, unfortunately, I think that the ego of Christian and Helmut is too big to allow, Gasly or Kvyat to return to that seat. If I'm honest, I could be wrong. And I think, you know, there could be opportunities elsewhere, like maybe Gasly to Renault in the future. I mean, you can imagine like him and Ocon potentially if Ricciardo goes to Ferrari. That could be cool, like all French lineup.
I I'm predicting Kvyat to go to Ferrari.
Really? Wow, that's a shout. What makes you think that?
Well, I could just say watch the video, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. I think I think um he would be a really solid number two driver to Charles Leclerc, and I think he would be happy to play second fiddle to Leclerc
Yeah.
because I think, and don't forget, he's already he's already been their simulator driver.
Sure.
He's already done some work for him, so I really do think that could happen. Um, I don't think that um, like Giovinazzi is gonna go to Ferrari, um, because I think he's just not good enough to go to Ferrari. But I really do think Kvyat could actually be be a good replacement for Vettel.
Yeah, I mean that could, for sure. I think what goes of this season will potentially determine that, because obviously Gio hasn't really proven himself enough yet. I think he had quite a strong end to last season, but obviously Gio does have that Italian connection, which could potentially kind of get him over the line. But as you say, Kvyat does have that Ferrari, you know, test driver, sim driver experience. So yeah, I mean that could be an interesting one for sure. I mean, do you think Sebastian will still be racing for Ferrari next year? You don't either. Interesting. What do you think will happen to him? Where do you think he'll go?
I think he's gonna go to McLaren.
Mm, interesting. And then what's going to happen to the McLaren boys?
I think Carlos. Um, I think Carlos Sainz may go to Renault. I think um, Ricardo might go back to Red Bull because
Really?
because I think I've read somewhere that he said in an interview that um, going driving for being second driver in a Red Bull is much better than being first driver in a Renault or something. I think I think
Mm.
I think he's not that happy at Renault as he makes out to be.
I mean, maybe, mate. That would be. I don't know. I feel like when Daniel left Red Bull, you know, Christian made some comments, didn't he, saying like, "Oh, he's running from a fight with Max." And again, I don't know. I feel like that bridge may have been burned, but you could be right. You never know. Maybe. That certainly would be a turn up for the books, I think.
I could also see, um, I could also see him going to Mercedes
Hmm.
if Hamilton retires.
Well, yeah, if Lewis was to retire, that could certainly kind of change things up. I mean, obviously you've got George Russell at Williams, who, a lot of people are saying that he's kind of obviously he hasn't been able to really prove himself in the Williams, but obviously he's a Mercedes young driver. Obviously you got Ocon at Renault as well. Maybe that could be a thing, although maybe the French connection at Renault would be enough to keep him. It's interesting, man. I think like I don't know. Like a question for you, like, is how do you think that? Obviously, most drivers are out of contract at the end of this season, but obviously we've had no racing yet. So I don't know. Do you see things changing maybe less than they would have if the season was kind of playing ahead as normal?
I think Hamilton will be off.
Do you think really?
Yes. Yes.
That's a big call. What makes you think that?
Because I think there's something going on between, like, Toto, Wolf, and Stroll.
Mm.
I think Wolf isn't getting on too well with the new head of Daimler, and I because apparently Wolf wanted to race in Australia, and then the new head of Daimler said that he had to change his mind and won't vote against it. So I don't think they got on too well, and I think he Toto is gonna end up working with Aston Martin and maybe even like being an investor in Aston Martin. And I think
Yeah, maybe.
I think that would mean that Lewis Hamilton is gonna end up retiring, because I think Lewis Hamilton wouldn't want to go on without Toto Wolff. But what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, well, do you think that? Because personally, I think Lewis is not retiring until he's not retiring whilst he's got the machinery to win 8 drivers' titles, because I think he'll want to not just match Michael's record, but I think he'll want to take all of the records. And there's like 4. I saw a tweet from Cranky Yankee yesterday, and he showed like there's like 4 separate records. You've got obviously like the most wins. You've got like obviously the most drivers' titles, and there's like 2 others as well that Lewis can potentially take away from or match to Michael Schumacher if he wins the World Drivers' title this year. And I think Lewis will. I think once Lewis makes it 8, I think then he'll throw it in. But I think that could be. I mean, he's early 30s. Lewis is now, isn't he? He's like 32, 33. I can't even remember, to be honest. He's 30s. Wow. Okay, he's older than I thought, to be fair. But he's still like he's still very. I mean, him and Max, I think, are the 2 best drivers. Like, I still think, he's got it, and I think whilst he can potentially get that 8th title, I think he's not going anywhere. And to be fair as well, I think, and obviously there's talk about the new regulations being pushed back to 23 now. I do think he'll want to try out that new machinery as well. I think he'll be too intrigued not to, but. Maybe, I don't know, because obviously he's got a lot going on outside of Formula 1 as well. A lot that he's kind of passionate about there. So maybe that could, move him away sooner than maybe I think. So maybe you could be right, man. You could be right.
Final question for you. Um, do you think we're gonna have any? Do you think we're gonna have a championship this year, or do you reckon it's gonna be axed altogether?
I think I think we will have a championship this year. I think it will obviously be a reduced grid. I think I don't know, I could be wrong here, but I think I remember reading something saying it needs to be at least 8 races, which I think, I mean, looking at the forecasts of when a lot of experts are saying this hopefully should be over, latest kind of, well, not over, of course, but in terms of this whole, like, massively changing everyone's lives, hopefully around kind of August, maybe even if it was September time, they could definitely fit in a decent sized season. And as well, like, I know people have said, oh well, if Lewis wins a reduced season, it's not a proper season, blah blah blah, which I think is a load of nonsense, because ultimately, like, the thing is with a reduced season is that every single race counts for more, because if there's only, say there's 22 races in a season versus 15 races, well, each race makes up a bigger percentage of the whole thing. So there's going to be way more riding on every race. You can't afford to have too many DNFs, otherwise that's your title up the Swanee straight away. So yeah, I think there will be a season, and I think it will be really competitive, because ultimately it will also, a lot of the smaller teams, and that will see a degree of opportunity there as well, because things are so shook up. But obviously it's worth mentioning as well, like, obviously with everything going on in the world, it's pretty crazy and pretty amazing what a lot of the F1 teams are doing in terms of coming together and helping develop all this kind of respiratory technology to help, which is obviously crazy, and it's testament to the fact that this sport is more than just a sport. Like, there's more to it than that, and yeah, man, it's a crazy time, but I do think we'll get a season. I'm very hopeful, and I do think Max Verstappen will be the 2020 world champion, but we will see. We will see.
Hey, well, once this is all over, right? We've got to meet up sometime.
Absolutely, mate. Definitely, that'll be good fun.
Cause my parents, they live down your way, so when I go and see them next, we can catch up sometime. Yeah.
Yeah, man, definitely. That sounds fun. I'll be bang up for that.
Thank you for being on doing this video audio version with me. It's been great talking to you, Tommo, and thank you for agreeing to doing this episode with me. It's been a blast.
Of course, mate. Anytime, buddy. It's been a long time coming, but I'm glad we got it done eventually. So yeah, thank you very much for having me, mate. It's been a pleasure.
No worries, mate. Cheers.
Yeah, yeah.